Shayne is on the road molding inevitably the next great kicker here, probably preparing some people for the draft. That's one of the things, Dan, that I want to talk with Shayne about when he is back next week, because we've got the combine going on right now, and I think they had the kicker workouts today.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd be curious to get his take on. I'm sure that's evolved since he went through the combine.
I'm sure it is, but I'm sure he's knowledgeable, because kicker is not a real draft-heavy position. I would like to kind of know the process of, like, how do you know, like, if they're interested in you as an undrafted free agent to come into camp, and, like, punters too, but, like, that, I mean, just from that perspective, like, because there's not very many kickers who are going to get their name called, if any. I think sometimes there's usually one or two on each year drafted, but, like, 7th round, and even then. But, like, there's a number of them who get to work out, try out, then get to camp at least, and then hit kick in the preseason.
Well, that's why we're going to have a decent amount of kickers, hopefully, for that declassified series that we just did with Eric, because there are so many kickers that get to the league, and they're not the ones that get drafted. I mean, we talked to one of them. We talked to Jake Moody, which he was a 3rd-round pick, which is very high.
Yeah, that's almost unheard of.
And then he ended up getting cut and doesn't play for the team that he got drafted by. So I don't know, for most teams, I don't know why they would be encouraged to take a kicker, because when you list kind of some of the best kickers in the league, Brandon Aubrey in Dallas, who's now trying to get be the first what would that be? 10-digit kicker here.
Yeah, wow.
For the Cowboys, he's a very good kicker. We've talked about him on the show with Shayne. He didn't go the traditional route. He didn't get drafted. Jake Bates, we know his story, being with the Lions.
Making kicks.
Yeah, brick salesman. He then ends up playing for whatever version it was at the time. I think it was the USFL, but
I think he hit a game winner in Ford Field.
Yeah.
Whatever team it was, the Michigan, I forget.
Michigan Panthers. Yes. But that's why it's wild that he had to go that route, and it's like he had to play in the stadium almost for then the Lions to go, oh, okay, let's see. I guess I could envision him kicking some game-winning field goals for us in this same stadium here.
And he's done it, so.
And he's been one of the better kickers. His numbers were a little bit down last year, but still one of the better kickers in the league.
At least if we can get it close to 50 yards, I think he can make it. It was like, who's the kicker for the playoff year that we wouldn't take a field goal because he barely could make 45-yarders? And he was Badgley, I think.
Yes.
Michael Badgley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I still contend that's why Campbell developed his aggressiveness. I know that there's a lot of other factors, and he's naturally probably a little bit that way. Right. But I think it started with the fact that he had no confidence in the kicker. And then they got Bates, and then he's still been aggressive, but he has toned that down because he can send Bates out at 55, 60, depending on what the score is.
No, I agree. Some of it was a product of the environment, but I think some of it is just his nature. I think he very much believes, if it's in plus territory and it's 3 yards or less, I think a lot of times he's going to go for it. But, there are times where let's make it a 2 or 3 score game, so let's actually take the points. I mean, it was much more reasonable since Bates has come around and proven himself.
Definitely. I do think those things go hand in hand, and I don't expect that to change because you might have Petzing with a little bit more of the kind of multiple tight end stuff and the more conservative on offense, but Petzing, Kafka, and Campbell all kind of made up the higher end of aggression, I think.
Right. We talked about that, I think, like a month ago when it first came around. Yeah, they, like, on a per basis, they were all in the top 10, I believe. I think Kafka would have been number 1 if he was the coach for the whole year.
Yeah.
And Campbell was 2, and I think Petzing would have been 10 as a play caller. But, did you see Campbell talk today? He actually, he was like, basically, we're not going to bring all of the 3 tight end thing. So, like, don't think we're going to mold our offseason around fitting Drew's scheme.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to, it's another tool to have in the belt. But it's more Drew can play to the strengths of what the team has. And Arizona had a few good tight ends, obviously one of the best, if not the best, but they had more tight ends and didn't have as good of receivers. But he's like, Drew knew everything, and I think Drew can come up with different things. And then he kind of alluded to Kafka being the creative side that they lost when Ben Johnson, not that Kafka won't have any other involvement, but like Kafka's kind of the dreamer, and he might throw some of those trick plays in, and then Drew can be the schemer and the play caller.
Exactly. Yeah, I think they're a good pairing together. And we actually had Jeremy Reisman on the show who did that long interview with Petzing. Basically like the first media availability, and that was the big thing that I took out of that was he molds to his talent, which I think is inevitably better because you can try to pick up somebody, you can try to get a tight end and improve the depth at tight end, but you don't want to overspend, overpay, overdraft a tight end just so you can get a third one, especially if other teams know you're doing that, then they're going to get aggressive, they're going to try to steal Brock Wright like San Francisco did or whatever.
Yeah, and like that's why I was like, I mean, to throw a name from the past, I always felt like that was kind of like what the Lions did in the 2000s. Like, oh, let's bring in Martz, and it's going to be the greatest show on turf. Yeah, but we don't have Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, Marshall Faulk, and Kurt Warner throwing the ball. We have John Kitna and who was that? Who had such a great caught 100 balls that year? I can't remember.
Oh, I'm trying to think.
Do you know who I'm like thinking?
I don't know. It's not coming to mind. I was a big John Kitna fan, though. I
thought he played good ball, but I was like. It's not like you can't just be like, oh, this guy brings the fun and gun offense and we're going to do it. You need the players still. But yeah, there was, one of the, I can't think of that receiver.
We're going to brainstorm on this.
Let's take a break.
We'll have to take a break, but I'm curious about this because I did like the Kitna era. It was just a lot of run and gun in general.
Yeah.
But no, you bring up a great example, and Petzing is clearly that way. I think people have given him a little too much flack for not producing the best offenses. But if you look at that talent that he had, both at Arizona and at Cleveland, and the kind of dearth of talent and the fact that he was down to second and third string players, I think he deserves a lot more respect. Same with Kafka, because what he was doing with Jameis Winston and and Tracy and all the backups that they had there.
Receivers who ended up like playing for him, but then we're on the Broncos in the playoffs, like Lil something Henry or something.
Oh yeah,
like that was, I can't remember his name, but yeah.
Right,
we'll take a quick break.
But yeah, we'll research this. I'm curious. I'm not thinking of who this is for that era, but we'll try to figure it out during the break and come back and chat a little bit more football. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. We have an answer here, Dan. You found it during the break. This name totally dropped from my memory, but I knew who it was when you identified it, and I've got his Pro Football Reference up here, and it was an amazing year.
Yeah, so Mike Fury. Yeah, for some reason I kept thinking of like Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, but he kind of played that same, like, he wasn't the explosive Roy Williams type, but he was the guy who caught 98 passes that year. And I think he did hit 1,000 yards, right?
Yeah, 98 receptions for 1,086 yards, and to your point, Dan, 11.1 in yards per reception. So not a lot of big.
He was the check down or the slot receiver.
Yeah. Only 6 touchdowns. That kind of indicates that he was falling short of the end zone, not really hitting a lot of 40-yard plus kind of routes. But I do remember him. Yeah, those Kitna years were just pure chaos because he never wanted to throw anything in the pocket. He just would wander out and bootleg and run around. And yeah, they were not the best years, but they were a good example of kind of what we're talking about. That these were a bunch of backups. They weren't necessarily highly touted players, but they tried to do their best with the players that they had.
Right.
But yeah, you can only do so much. Those players are going to get increased usage, have better numbers as a result of being in a starting role, but you still want to play to your talent, and the Lions have a lot of talent now.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see what I like. And Dan Campbell still says it's not like we need to do, like we need to reinvent the wheel. We are still a top 5 offense, but efficiency could get better. And I think the biggest thing was being in like third and manageable or fourth and manageable, but like it was just tough to watch. We would call it almost seemed like silly plays on fourth down, but I don't know if that was because we just didn't have the offensive line or what, but it just didn't look, I don't expect 15 wins, but I feel like even though a top 5 offense was very good, there's something we can get better at. And I'm not quite smart enough to identify it, but it does feel like there's some room for growth.
Oh, definitely. Well, and I think you hit on I know that's been the focus with the whole offensive line thing, but it is a legitimate issue. They did basically nothing went to plan. You had the whole Ragnow thing, and then even him coming back didn't go to plan. I do like Glasgow, but he he's aging. His foot speed is slow. I don't want to
he's
say
younger than us, but he's old for football.
Exactly.
So.
And my foot speed is even slower. So I'm not insulting him, but for a starter in the NFL, that's what he struggled with, because that used to be Ragnow's position, and Ragnow was very good with the movement. He had great size for the position. Glasgow doesn't have that lateral movement this late in his career, and you can't blame him. It's not necessarily it's a tough thing to do. So I think you've got to potentially fill in for him. You've got Ratledge that they've talked about maybe moving over. There's a lot of talent in the draft. With Decker coming back, you can kind of make tackle at least a little bit more flexible. I still think they're going to draft a tackle, but you don't necessarily have to have the same level of urgency, and you can take somebody that's maybe slightly more developmental.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably 2 centers coming in this offseason. Like, I think there's a guy they're going to trust to be the starter and a depth guy, because I mean, I don't think Glasgow could come back. I guess but I feel like they need to improve. I like Ratledge where he's at guard. I feel like trying to put all of that on him. He's a mauler. Go out there and attack. I mean, everyone has to learn protections and everything, but they count on that center to be calling out coverage. Like, he's the quarterback of the offensive line. I know that sounds kind of silly, but Ragnow was so good at that and so experienced. They need somebody who has starting experience, who's not being forced to learn a new position.
I agree with you. I don't think they need to force that on Ratledge. He had good development over the course of the year. You're going to reset that development arc if you put him at center. He's going to start ahead of the game if he starts at the same position. If he moves to center, he's going to have to relearn a lot of things with those calls, with the movement in the middle, because that's often the toughest position, not knowing really where you have to go and feeling out what the stunts are on the defense and who you're going to have to block. So I like leaving him there. I think they're going to do, and we'll talk to Josh about this, because I think what they're going to do is have a kind of a free agent draft combo with that.
I could see that.
I don't know if it'll be a guard center that they draft, because they do have McLaughlin that they got up from the Bengals, and he's kind of looming. He was from Ohio State, if people remember him. I could see him developing as that backup younger center, future center. But they're going to want an experienced play caller. No, not necessarily Linderbaum or McGovern or guys like that, because they're going to be very high paid.
But, don't say no, because Brad Holmes was singing a different tune. He also spoke today. He was he didn't say oh, we got a budget for a family vacation this time. He was like, no, every year is different. So I think he's obviously not ever going to show his cards, but I think he might actually be a little more open to at least 1 or 2 premium position being outside help. I
do too, and I think they are going to spend more in general. It'll depend on how much they restructure. I could see them even having interest in Drew Petzing's old center in Arizona. He hasn't been cut yet, but he's a cut candidate at Arizona. Froholt, and Josh is the perfect one to have this conversation with, because it's a great lead into that, because we're going to have Josh Quapo on after the break. He works for PFF, and he's done a lot of contract evaluation coverage on his own, so he knows the salary cap better than 99.9% of people here. So he'll educate us on that and take us through the Lions perspective, for the Lions offseason from his perspective here. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM.